today I want to talk really about three big areas. A little bit about consumer guarantees, a little bit about trading online, and a perennial favourite whenever I come to the IPA, and that is the issue of business scams, which is always something that floats around. And finally, after that, in order to assist your clients, we've also got an online program that might be of interest for clients who've got concerns or questions or areas where you think, I don't quite know, but I'm happy to point you in the right direction. So I'll run through that as well. So big picture, most of you will be familiar with the ACCC, often from Today Tonight, or a current affair where we are cracking down, so to speak, on people selling free-range eggs, or we did recently someone selling palm oil that was meant to be 100% product of something else, and of course it was 97% palm oil, those sort of products. So killer toys you see around Christmas time, that's us. We are responsible for not only general things like competition regulation, you know, the eternal debate about Coles and Woolworths, shopper dockets and petrol, but we also look after killer toys, general consumer law and product safety, and interestingly enough, we're also the country's principal regulator of major pieces of infrastructure. Next year, for example, the Congress is going to be in the Hunter Valley, and the Hunter Valley is the biggest coal supply chain in the world, and we actually oversee the logistics about how that actually works, which is a feat unto itself. So really, it's those three areas: equitable competition, looking after consumers and making sure that their interests are really the bottom line about where we go to and what we decide to do. Sometimes we look at specific industries like franchising. And a special focus for us at all times is small businesses, because in many cases, small business owners, micro business owners, don't have a lot of information. They're worried about what they can and can't do. And principally, one of the reasons why I found the IPA such a helpful organisation is a lot of the times people go to their accountant, as we all know, for more than just the functional aspects. It's also that management advice. Sometimes it's about growth, and sometimes it's also about compliance. What can I or can't I do? And we formed one of those grey areas where sometimes you might sit there and think, I'm not sure if you're allowed to do that. So happy to try and help you with those ones. In general, does anyone know the volume of business to consumer and business to business transactions that takes place in Australia every year? There's 5 billion transactions a month. Isn't that just staggering? You think about every time you go into a shop, you buy a newspaper, or someone delivers a newspaper to your door, or a business does a deal with someone else, and you start putting those together. 2 million businesses in Australia, and every one of them is doing more than just one transaction. That's a huge amount. So really, in some respects, it's kind of like the law of last resort. People don't spend all day, every day, looking this up against the Act, but really when push comes to shove, when there's a conflict, when there's a large firm and a small firm in serious fallout between each other, or consumers feel that they've got a complaint that isn't being listened to, that's really our role. But clearly we don't get involved in 5 billion activities a month. And as you can see there, I haven't got to put it up there, but we've got a staff of about 700, so we can't do it all. We have to prioritise things. Just to give you a taste for things though, has anyone heard of, before I get to that one, has anyone heard of TaxSmart? Yeah, TaxSmart. Matter, what do you know about it? Yeah, they're a franchise. We've actually got them in court at the moment. Russell? They weren't actually what they were saying they were offering. Yes, yeah. Now, yeah. I'll couch this carefully in the terms that our lawyers and the organisation will say. It is alleged, allegedly. We received a complaint from a number of overseas students who had just done the postgrad accounting program, who bought into franchises, and their assertion is that they paid quite large amounts of money, somewhere in the vicinity of $40,000 to $80,000, to buy a TaxSmart franchise to become a tax agent. But of course, in order to qualify for that, they first had to do their year, and so the terms of the deal were a year as an employee of TaxSmart. You pay for your franchise beforehand, then you do your year of employment. At the end of the year, you therefore qualify to be a tax agent, and you can then operate a TaxSmart franchise. Our allegation on behalf of, I think, 16 of those 18 students is that they paid the money but were then made redundant halfway through the year. And because they were made redundant through the halfway of the year, our argument is they weren't then able to exercise the franchise and they didn't get the franchise money back. So now that's before the court, so I can't really go into it more, but just to give you an example of the sort of things that we do that actually hit directly onto the profession. That's, I think, a really classic one in terms of it. You know, sometimes we spend a lot of time coming up here saying, can you pass this on to your clients? But there are also times when we're dealing front and centre with accounting matters like that. So that is very much a watch this space matter. As I said before, it's before the courts, and these things always take a long time to go through the courts. So, 5 billion transactions a month, a piece of law that's about 1,000 pages long, and a couple of hundred staff. And I don't know if anyone saw also the Treasurer going on about the ACCC being $100 million short of what it needs to do its job this week. As he described it, spiders in the cupboard. He said there are spiders in the cupboard, and just one of them is that the ACCC doesn't have enough money to do its job. We're pretty pleased to hear him say that we don't have enough money. But what do we put as priorities? Well, we can't obviously deal with everything all the time. And so what makes us choose one matter like tax smart and not another matter? Well, there's some areas we use as are always priorities for us. For example, cartels. And the classic one is the client that walks through the door and says, look, my opponent, my competitor, has rung me and made the suggestion about, you know, here's a price that we can both live with, or I'm happy to take north of the river, if you're happy to take south of the river, or you can think of variations to that. They're all illegal. Cartel arrangements are illegal. And in fact, in Australia, if they're over $1 million, those things actually bring jail time with them as well. Yes, I can see a couple of shocks. So yeah. So small scale ones, if you're guilty, you'll get a fine. But if a large scale one, and $1 million isn't really a huge amount of turnover, no. So those sort of things people inadvertently sometimes stray into, but it is a priority for us all the time. General issues about misuse of market power, and that's one of the areas we're looking at with Coles and Woolworths at the moment. For example, the allegation is that they have basically said to many of the suppliers, you'll supply us, but you do it on these terms, you must take these rebates, and in a way that basically makes it really hard for them to work, and it's not a matter of them being able to sit down as equals effectively and nut out what's a commercially workable solution for both of them. And product safety, because no one wants to see their kids choking on magnetic toys or buying food that is unsafe. So that's product safety. Recall a couple of months ago there was a recall of VW cars, Volkswagen cars. Yep, that was that was us. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And what are you driving at the moment?
Mine was done last week. Thank you.
I hope it was free of charge for you.
It was.
It should have been. Good, good. Last year we did.
And they washed and vacuumed.
Oh, excellent, even better. Last year we had to do one for, I think it was Great Wall, you know, the Chinese cars. And we discovered that their I think it was the gaskets actually had asbestos in them. Yeah, that was quite a surprising one. And even though people said, well, it's unlikely to be disturbed, it's kind of like, no, you don't put asbestos in products, you know, doesn't matter. So they're sort of product recall issues. We do a report where we actually talk about the areas we focus on in the small business area. So if you want to have a look through, it's in there. And in there, each year we look at what do we get from businesses and what do they mainly come to us and concerned about. And you can actually see one of the biggest things small businesses are concerned about is issues like what we call misleading conduct. I'll be told something and it wasn't the truth. And it can be claims, for example, another business told me that, or it can be, for example, I signed up to something and realised that that wasn't what I was going to get, what I was going to deal. Interestingly, the federal government is talking about introducing unfair, as I mentioned earlier, unfair business-to-business contracts. Maybe if we've got time at the end, I'll talk about that, because that potentially could have some impact on a lot of commercial dealings. Other things that you see there, the second one is consumer guarantees, and that's why that one's a fairly straightforward one. I'm going to touch on that in a minute as something to see. Consumer guarantees. Quick question for you. Are you permitted to have a no refund sign in a store? Good, yes, excellent. That's the correct answer, yeah, the correct answer. And what dollar value do you have to have in order, it's required to give a customer a receipt? There is a minimum dollar value. Anything over $75, you're supposed to have a receipt. There you go, today's trivia time piece. Look, a couple of years ago, the consumer laws, which used to be different in every state, were consolidated and standardised. And some of those areas which people kind of thought they knew about, but they were different because every state had slightly different laws, basically put a common set of rules in place. The first one is it's illegal to make a blanket statement like no refunds. In fact, we've had a court case that was $3 million with Hewlett-Packard for those sort of issues where clients were ringing up and being told, well, if it's not working, it's too late. We don't have to repair it, and you can't deny people a right to a refund or a repair under certain circumstances.
Does that apply for auction or second-hand?
No, a bit different for option. Yeah, there are some things if you think about it, like if you buy it privately from someone, or if you buy it at an auction, where it's pretty much the rules of the game are it's as is. Yeah, the key ones are really a really simple way to think about this is essentially most things when they break down fall into two categories. Buy a watch. It's supposed to be waterproof. You put it in a swimming pool and it stops working. That's a major defect. It just doesn't work anymore. And you bought it because it was a waterproof watch. When a major breakdown occurs, the customer is entitled to either get it replaced, to get their money back if they want, or if they want to, they can ask for it just to be fixed up. They can have it repaired. So they get the choice of a replacement, a repair, or a refund, because it's a major breakdown. A simple one though, sometimes there are minor defects. For example, I buy the watch, but the clasp doesn't quite stick. You know, for example, when I put it on my wrist, it doesn't quite smoothly click into place. That's pretty minor. It's not the sort of thing where you say, well, I would never have bought the watch in the first place. And when it's a minor one, the business gets the choice of choosing what it wants to do. That's the simplest way to think about it. And it applies to goods and services too. So if someone is you commission someone to paint your house, and paint it in the next 2 weeks and they don't turn up, then you're entitled to a refund or replacement. Well, not really much a replacement, really essentially a refund or I'll get it done or a discount or something like that, but you get the call on it. So it's goods and services. Now the important thing though is that for most businesses, and most of our clients here are small businesses, also have particular rights, because when you read a lot of these documentations, they will talk about customers can do this, customers can do that. What about the poor old business? Well, first of all, businesses are quite within their own means to turn around and deny service to someone who says, well, look, I can find this cheaper. The classic one today is, I can find it cheaper on the web. You know, I bought this off you, but now I can find it cheaper. I want my money back. Well, that's not your problem. That's the customer's problem. So simply because someone changes their mind or they no longer want something is not grounds. You might decide you want to give them a refund because it's just good business, but that's entirely your call. You're not obliged to. So it's really important for businesses to be aware of that. So changes their mind, as I said up there, it's cheaper elsewhere, or of course if they give it a good old hammering, they put a hammer to your watch and then come back and ask for a refund. No. So the other one though is that most businesses, there's also a rule, anything that's worth under $40,000, businesses are treated as customers. So if a small business goes into a stationery supply firm, buys a couple of reams of paper and doesn't work, or buys, indeed $40,000 is actually quite a generous threshold, buys some IT, they're treated as a customer as well. So generally it's about consumers, it's about the public, but small businesses also get rights. So sometimes if you've got customers coming in feeling like they've been hard dealt with by a larger firm, a first point is to say, ask them, were you really a customer in the first place? Sorry? Yeah.
What do you define a micro business at that point?
The $40,000, it's really actually the $40,000 figure rather than the nature of the business. I just put that up there conveniently. Yeah, it's $40,000 full stop. Yeah. Interestingly, the $40,000 isn't indexed. So one day that actually won't be worth much, but at the moment it covers a fair bit, yeah. If you've got a client who wants to actually sort of have some sort of policy about when they will and won't give refunds, we've actually got pre-printed brochures that you can give out, or even like little displays you can put on your front counter to say, this is when we do and don't give refunds. And, you know, it complies with the law. And as I mentioned before, we've taken on a couple of matters, $3 million from Hewlett-Packard. And we found an increasing number of IT firms that when you ring up and something doesn't work, they'll say, it's out of warranty, it's out of guarantee. There isn't a fixed time for a warranty. Basically the rule is as long as it's meant to last for, which is a bit vague. a lot of times they'll say it's 12 months, but you'll think, now it depends on horses for courses. Some things you buy and they're really cheap and no one reasonably expects them to last for a long time. But if you buy, you know, an expensive piece of IT that most people would say this is going to work for several years, and they say, well, it's only a 12-month warranty, they're wrong. Yeah. And it's not, obviously you can't sit down and publish a list and say this is the lifespan of it. It's a bit arguable, but that's something similar to what happened with the Hewlett-Packard matter. So if you're getting those sort of issues, the tip I can tell you from where we come from is push back and don't take what you get given necessarily as always being the accurate statement sometimes.
Some would want you to sign forms, you know, warranty forms, and if you don't sign this, you're not getting warranty. That doesn't.
No, your warranties are yours, you're entitled to.
You don't have to sign that card or that whatever they're asking you to do.
No, I mean it might be something like a firm saying if you're sending it back to us, we need you to prove that it was you. That would be okay. But if it's something sort of saying, well, we want you to waive your rights, or then certainly not.
When you buy something, they want you to fill the card in to register
Yeah.
your warranty.
Yeah, you're entitled to the warranties inherently. You don't have to register for a warranty. And just like extended warranties, ask yourself a question about extended warranties.
Don't.
Yeah. Yes, okay. I don't need to convince anyone here about those. Far be it from me to say anything, but you may have seen the Simpsons episode where Homer says, you know, there are some great myths in life, including extended warranties. Yeah, be very careful about them. You've got a right to things, regardless of whether you fill in a form, you've got them. Sorry?
Or registered online.
Yeah. So, sorry?
Yes, as long as we keep the invoice and
Yeah.
the paper with the warranty
Yeah.
is enough.
Well, yeah, we've actually got an app. It's a consumer app, and on it, it's actually got you can download, and it actually has a facility where you can store the receipts. So if you lose the paper receipt, you can just keep the electronic receipt. It's not a bad idea, actually. And in fact, you could think about a lot of small businesses that would probably be just useful as a backup anyway for them.
Can I ask you another question?
Please.
I bought like 2 months ago
Yep.
some bean coffee machine.
Yep.
That'd be normal.
Yep.
After
Oh, right.
2 weeks, the frothing stopped working.
Right.
I went back to be normal with the machine and said, hey, this is not working. They washed their hands. They said, we can't give you or replace this machine. You need to deal directly to...
You need to deal directly with the manufacturer? No.
So I
Yeah.
don't know my rights. And I said,
Yeah.
okay.
Now, if you get, first of all, if the person who sells it to you is responsible for taking on the burden of fixing it, okay? Sometimes for some small businesses, you've got to actually be really careful and say, look, are you aware of this? Because, you know, ultimately it may have come from the manufacturer and they have to fix it. And there's a different set of rules about the relationship between the retailer and the manufacturer. But for you as a consumer, no, it's not your fault or your problem that it lies with the manufacturer. Your port of call is you go back to the retailer. You can go to the manufacturer if you want to, but you don't have to. You're perfectly within your rights to go to the retailer. And in fact, the Harvey Norman matter is where we've got 9, I think it is, franchisees with the same issue about claims about customers coming back and being told, well, we can't deal with it. You have to deal with it directly. So it's very similar, I think, to that, what you're talking about there. If you don't get any joy, ring either your state consumer affairs agency or the ACCC hotline. Basically, we have an arrangement because both the states and ourselves administer the same law, that if it's a local matter, eventually usually the state agency will chase it up, and if we think it's a serious federal one or it goes right across the border or it's an ongoing case, then we'll deal with it. But either way, we'll put you in touch with where you need to go. So, was there another question or? Yes. Yeah, the extended warranties is something that many businesses do offer, not as many now as used to. And what's said to you is, you're entitled, by paying more, we'll keep you under warranty for longer than it would be. Now, businesses are free to do that, but as a customer, first of all, there are certain, as I've just pointed out, there are certain basic warranties that you're entitled to fundamentally, so you don't have to pay for them. Secondly, you've got to ask yourself then, how much extra protection would I get over and above what the law gives me, and is it worth it? And that's really a choice you need to think about. A lot of consumer advocates will say there's not a lot of extra money for it and not a lot of extra value for it. So we don't, it's not outlawed, but it's one of those ones, buyer beware before you go down that path. I think it is really worth thinking about. Now, a couple of questions about trading online. Question for you, is it illegal to charge a different price if you sell something online and if you sell it in a shop? Nope. Nope.
No,
No, it's not.
less cost.
But as long as you make it clear to customers that it's a different prices, different online prices. If you don't, then you can potentially run into problems. There's a couple of areas we're finding with online trading because it's become obviously much more important. The first one is this confusion. Can I charge different prices? Yes, you can, but make sure you don't fall into the trap of advertising one price, and then when someone goes online and says, oh, actually, it's more because it's online or it's more because it's in the store, then you break the law. So you've either got to make it really clear or to make a decision that you're going to charge the same price. It doesn't matter what you do. Common sense here. It's about making sure the customer knows before they buy. That's the issue there. The other one that we're finding also, though, is wholesalers and suppliers saying to businesses, you can't undercut. If you want to sell it online, I'll only supply it to you if you charge the same price as bricks and mortar stores. That's price fixing. That's illegal. So keep an eye out for that one as well. We find a number of really small businesses doing that, everything from aquariums to beauty products, where the supplier has said, I will supply this to a small online business, but the condition is you've got to charge the same as or more than your bricks and mortar competitors. It's basically because the bricks and mortar competitors are putting pressure on to say, we don't like being undercut on the net. Now, the other question, social media, increasingly important tool, but be very careful about what consumers or people who subscribe to any one of your databases, or if you've got some interactive forum, if it's your business forum, you ultimately take responsibility for it. And we're seeing a couple of interesting things happening in commentaries. First of all, we're seeing cases where customers are putting things up through social media on business sites, and which are incorrect, and ultimately that then becomes the business's responsibility. Now, from where we sit, we try and use a horses for courses sort of approach. So if it's some little business and they've got a handful of followers, we'd probably cough politely and just give them a tap on the shoulder and say, make sure you don't do it again. If it's a major multinational with a very active and a very visible social media campaign, then it's pretty much, if you haven't pulled it down as soon as it goes up, then that's a problem for you. So just be careful about that one. But the other one we're also seeing is people putting fake reviews up.
Oh,
Yeah, okay, that one too, that one, yeah.
What a great restaurant that isn't.
Yeah. And there's really some, everything from cut and pastes. We had a business that was putting, a removalist business, they were putting fake reviews up. The really interesting thing was when you Google the phrase, you actually realise it was for a restaurant or something 3 years ago. They just basically cut it and put it on their website. So that wasn't going to work too well. But the other one also, sometimes businesses doing all sorts of things like encouraging people, will only put up positive reviews or we'll take it off if we don't like it, which is different to sort of saying we're taking it off, of course, you may have broken the law the point above. So just be really careful. Customers have got to be really careful, but businesses have also got to be careful about the impression you convey. And final one, things like group buying firms. Now, I'm not saying group buying is not a problem. Everyone familiar with the idea of group buying? Group buying sites, now these are just some examples, and these are not necessarily businesses that I'm saying are creating a problem, but Catch the Day, Scoop On, those sort of ones, where basically people can subscribe to them, public, and every day you'll get an email saying there is a discount on this product today. It's deeply discounted. Now, what happens from when you're the small business operator is those group buying schemes come to you and say, we'll put you on and you've got to offer it at a really deep discount, but the trade-off is you should get more business for it, or you should be able to attract new customers for it. The problem with group, so you think, okay, that's probably a marketing tool. Now, apart from the fact you probably want to think from a marketing strategy, do I really want to attract customers who are only buying because it's a 50% discount? Much less what impact is that actually having on my margins, which is probably, you're actually running at a loss probably. But what we are finding also, some businesses coming back and saying, well, actually, they said they'd sell 300 of these, but they basically took anyone who signed up to it. So they've actually sold 1,000 of them for me, and they're at a 50% discount, so now I'm making a substantial loss, and now I'm being forced to honour all these. So that it can have real cash flow implications for a business. So as a marketing tool, you've got to think carefully about it. How are we going for time, Vicky? Okay. Now, scams are the other one that is always a popular one for businesses. Scams are a big news in Australia. They account for half of all the people who email or phone us in our national contact centre, more than 80,000 a year, and really horrifying figures. Have a look at that, $93 million reported loss. Now, that's only the general public. We got Curtin University in Perth to do a study of small businesses, and they found even more frightening figures for small businesses. 3/4 are approached by scammers. 1 in 3 for the general public, 3/4 of all businesses, and a really high victim rate, 1 in 8, 12%. Now, the women there will probably smile at the red there. It says, who's most vulnerable? Men. Men have a we surmise they have a little bit more ego going on there about what's going on there. But not surprisingly, retail operators and people who are already online attract online predators. And because most of these scams are coming online. The real problem, though, is that the money is almost irreversibly gone. And the second one, which isn't up there, but I do want to touch on it, is that when you go back to the business owners and say, what's your response to it? Their first response is, I'm not trading online anymore. I got scammed, so it's safe, I'm just not going online. And that's a real danger, because then your clients are going to miss out on what's the fastest growing market, the online market. Now, some businesses are getting a little bit cluey about what they do. So some of them are using things like they get approaches from people to buy products and they think, I don't know you, I've never heard of you, why are you emailing me? So they might do something like Google Map it or Street View it to check and see if the address that's given is a bona fide one. A smart one is sometimes if I'm going to trade online, I'll do it through a separate bank account, so if it gets compromised. That's not a bad one, actually. Separate debit card, sometimes even a separate account, so I limit the risk from online trading, because the real danger is they get hold of your accounts, and then if you realise you've been dudded, you've got to actually change all your accounts, and that is not just downtime, but also the interruption. You've got to go back to your legitimate clients and go through all that process of reconnecting them again. So that's not a bad idea at all. And even things like actually gut reaction, that final one, someone saying, well, we'll get someone in the business who most knows the sort of people we typically deal with, so if we get an approach from someone we don't know, gut reaction sometimes, this sounds a bit strange, a bit unusual. Gut reaction is actually worth an awful lot. The ones that are, now some of the scams that are around have been around forever and a day. The false bill, you get an invoice, it used to be by fax, sometimes it was in the mail, the classic one. Yes, thanks Dennis, yeah, that is the classic one. Yeah, and of course most people, what do when they see it? Yeah, I can't remember it, but I must have paid it, otherwise I wouldn't have sent it. But have a look at the third one, the email intercept, which has started to pop up, where people are doing business. And we had a forum for this in Perth in June, and this woman who runs a business doing trade in China came to this. And what happened was her emails had been intercepted, someone else, and they changed. When you looked at it, you realised there was one letter's difference in the email address. And what they'd done is they'd intercepted one of the accounts. When she sent an account to what she thought was her legitimate client, they'd intercepted the email, taken the PDF, redone it with a different account details, put it back in a PDF and then sent it on to the client. So the client thought that they were getting a bill from her and the money was intercepted in between, diverted off. That was a one-woman business and she lost $40,000. Oh. So pretty much she said, it took her 2 years pretty much to get back on her feet. And it's quite a horrifying one, the email intercept, because it's really insidious. It's harder, I think, to pick up than some of the other ones there. The other one that small business centres, like the business enterprise centres and such like are saying is a big issue at the moment, are approaches from a group called Grant Gov, or GovGrant, G-O-V-G-R-A-N-T, and it looks like it's a government grants agency. But basically, it's not so much an outright fraud, but what it does say is you need to pay us money to find out whether or not you can get grants from the Australian government. And it looks very close to being an official government site. The Australian government never charges people to tell them what money it might be able to give them. So there's some of the ones that you need to be aware of.
Tax refund one come up again too.
Yeah, tax refund is isn't it? It's a perennial.
It just came up again about a week ago.
Yeah?
Yeah, we had about 10 clients, they rang, everyone rang, said, I have my refund, what's this about? I said, scam, go
Yeah.
away.
Which is why the ATO puts this, what you think for today seems quite archaic. They said, you know, we don't communicate those things by email, we only put them in mail. And that's one of the reasons why.
Oh, it is, very, very good.
Has it got the logo?
Oh, yeah, it's
It's got the whole works, yeah.
incredibly well.
Yeah. And the great problem for us is that we've got the Scam Watch website where people can report it, but most of the time detecting it and chasing them up is almost impossible because the scammers have moved on, or they're based overseas outside of our reach. Really interesting one. We don't do it for small businesses, but we do it for the public where in Western Australia the police force actually tracks dating and romance scams, and when they think people are losing large amounts of money, anyone losing more than $100,000 in a transaction, that's a huge amount of money. They'll go and knock on their door and say, we think you may be the victim of a scam because, you know, this money's going, it's going to a couple of countries that are regarded as scam hotspots. More than half the people they approach basically shut the door on them and say, well, no.
Yeah.
So victims, people sometimes become their own worst victims as well. So, yeah. So, sorry? Oh, the overpayment one, it's a little bit hard to get your head around when you first hear about it. It's basically an approach where someone says, I'll buy something off you. So I contact you out of the blue. Let's pretend you're just a retailer. And I say, I'll pay you. And I send you money, but it's actually more than you asked for. And then you get a follow-up phone call or another email saying, look, I made a mistake. Can you just send me back the difference? Why? Well, the original amount is often done on a fake or stolen credit card or some other means, so you're never going to get the original money. So they make a profit out of asking you for the money back. And it's kind of convincing because you look at it and you go, I've got the money, and then someone, oh, I've made a terrible mistake, but rather than reverse the transaction, why don't you just send me the difference?
In 3 days later, it fails.
Yeah, the transaction doesn't get honoured, but you've already sent the money. Your money will get honoured. Yeah. Well, one of the interesting things about scams is that whilst a lot of these are electronic, there's also this counterintuitive thing where there's actually an awful lot more scams now than by phone because people are kind of a bit more used to email scams. So when someone rings you up, and it's really cheap to do with voice over internet from overseas, and people, if you can actually get a conversation with them, are actually more likely to fall victim because once you can start talking to someone, it's much easier to spin the web. Yeah.
There's another one where they work on it as well. Somebody will ring you around tea time at night, and you answer the phone,
Yes.
there's nobody there. So you put it down. The temptation is to redial it.
And then you get scammed by one of those expensive numbers.
And you're paying for it all.
Yeah, yeah. Look, the bottom line advice we say with scams, apart from please, you know, you can report it, B, don't pay it. But the other final thing is, if you get approached by what you think is a scammer, don't confirm it for them. You know, just hang up, delete, throw it in the bin. Because interestingly enough, there's a huge international trade illegally in databases, and they get them from all sorts of things, from social media, from raffle ticket butts, from all sorts of things. Some stolen, some legally obtained. And when potential victims actually reply back, even to say, I know you know, this is a scam, what it's doing for them is confirming that the database is valid. So it's not going to make a deal, it's not going to bust scamming apart, but to the extent it's possible, we say to Australians, just don't get back to them because then they're just left in one more state of element, have I got a valid list, you know?